guys, welcome back. So today we have a very important video. I do encourage you to share this video across all of your social media channels. And this is very important to me as an American citizen, but joining me today, I have two Canadian citizens. And these are folks that are very much involved in what we would call the two-way movement in Canada. Sadly, they don't have a Second Amendment, which probably contributes to a bit of the problems they're struggling with. But we want to talk about this most recent kerfuffle that's happening up there that's made national news that prompted me to make this video. And so first I want to introduce Ian Runkle of the Bailey, a respected firearms attorney in Canada. Ian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a really important topic.
I would agree. And then Tom Simpson, thank you so much for joining us as well. You're the owner of the Canadian Mutligun business. Unfortunately, a lot of the Canadian laws and rules that they're passing have negatively affected you, the sport that you enjoy, and even your business. And so we want to hear about that. With all that being said, Ian, I'm going to hand it off to you. Can you give the audience a real quick breakdown as to what's going on and why we're having this conversation today? And maybe a little bit later we can get into some of the other Canadian politics that are going on Americans should know about.
So what happened is that Canada decided to ban a whole bunch of makes and models of firearms, and it started off primarily aimed at the AR-15, but there were some other classifications. They banned things with a bore diameter that is too large, and that largely covered people who were like military collectors. There are people out there with like grenade launchers. They can only fire chalk because you can't get real grenades, of course. But none of these firearms have been a problem in Canada. We have not seen, there's never been a homicide in Canada with a legally owned AR-15. It's just never happened. Similarly, there's never been a homicide with a grenade launcher in Canada or any of these other things. But they had these initial categories. And so they said, okay, all of these things are immediately banned. And a whole bunch of us, because they'd shut the ranges down during COVID, I just had a brand new AR that had arrived during the time that the ranges are shut down. So I had not yet been able to shoot it, and then they said, okay, this is banned. But they issued what's called an amnesty, and the amnesty is actually, the provisions for it are in the law, and it specifies that the terms of this amnesty basically say you can keep it while we figure out a buyback. You could take it to get destroyed if you want. You can move with it, a very limited number of things, but you could not, under any circumstances, take it to the range to go shooting. So that was out immediately. But these things have been required to be kept in a safe, or just however you'd have stored it, which... Now, at that time, they said, listen, we've only banned a few makes and models, so it's okay. You can go buy another gun to participate in shooting sports. And what happened is there was a lot of sort of grumbling, but you'd see people, if you went out to the 3-gun matches, which I'm sure my friend will be able to tell you more about, all of the ARs were not being used anymore, but, there'd be people there with a Tavor or various other things. And it was kind of all right, so there's a lot of cope guns out here, but we're doing the best we can. Well, then they had further successive rounds of banning. And basically what they told everybody is you can buy other guns, and any time people did buy other guns, they turned around and banned those, making it clear that the goal really was to shut down sport shooting in Canada. So at this point, it is very difficult to run anything resembling a 3-gun match. I've had people tell me, well, if you like 3-gun, and I do, just go compete in the U.S. And I can tell you, there's no way I can compete in a U.S. match at this point, because if I walk down there and what I've been practicing on is a Ruger 1022, my abilities to, I'm just going to get laughed out of there. Already it was bad when I'd go down, and because magazines in Canada are pinned to 5 rounds by law for center fire semi-autos, that was the law beforehand, I'd already get laughed at when I'd be sitting there and I'd start a stage, I'd shoot 5 rounds and dump an entire 30-round mag, and people would be like, why'd you do that? And I'm like, muscle memory, guys. It's sorry.
But I'm laughing, guys, but it's not funny. But,
it was kind of funny at the time. But now they've banned basically all of these things, and a whole lot of people who at the initial ban said, oh, well, I'm not so worried, this will never affect me, are going, wait a minute, this does affect me. Because there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of people who are affected who don't even realize it. Because when they say we're banning assault-style firearms, that term, they've admitted in court, means only, it's a term that they apply to anything they want to ban, right? So call it a scary name, and then nobody's going to complain that it's banned.
And I think it's worth noting the sort of firearms that have been banned, not just AR-15 and grenade launchers. We're talking 22s, we're talking 12 gauges, we're talking hunting rifles. It's a real mix of things where you wouldn't expect your average person who owns a firearm to look at it and say, I'm in possession of a prohibited assault-style firearm, so I'm not going to take it to the range. And that puts people's lives and livelihoods at risk.
And this is becoming a huge issue, because I'm hearing ranges, for instance, somebody comes in with the gun that they've used for hunting for the last, 20 years, and the range, they only take it in to sight it in once a year before hunting season. And I'm hearing from ranges that they've had to tap people on the shoulder and go, that's actually super illegal now, right? And people go, what? I didn't think this would affect me. There's, a whole bunch of military antiques. Some of these guns are worth north of $100,000. They've covered like a bunch of purdy, safari guns. Yeah. And they're proposing to pay pennies on the dollar, because what they're at now, they did a trial run of sort of a buyback from businesses. So they went to businesses and they said, we're going to buy out your inventory of these, now banned guns that you can't sell. And that was sort of their first trial run. Their second trial run is happening right now in Cape Breton, where they're going to seize 200. It's limited to 200 guns. And, for the buyback after that. And then once that's done, they're going to roll it across nationwide. And they're calling it a buyback, and they're saying it's voluntary, but it's nothing of the sort. Because when they say it's voluntary, it's voluntary to get paid, but it's not voluntary to have the guns seized. And there's not even a guarantee of getting paid. It explicitly says on their webpage that there is no guarantee that you'll get paid. What they want people to do, the way this works, is if you want to participate, you have to actually go and fill out a form and tell them every gun that you have, and then maybe they will pay you. That's tell them everything you have is required as a preliminary step to participate. But then afterwards they've said maybe you'll get paid, and they've announced that they have, or they didn't announce, they actually let slip in a leaked audio that there's $750 million budgeted. 2/3 of that is expected to go to administration costs, and the rest of that is the pot to pay people out. And when that runs out, they're just not going to pay people. They're going to say, well, sorry. And because they're trying to cap this, when they previously had gun restriction measures, the budgets on it have always blown out, like 10 times. 20 times what they budgeted. It's always just exploded. So here what they've said is, we've got $750 million. First, we're going to pay the administration and whatever other costs. And then any money left over goes to be the pool for payouts. So you could sign up for this and end up paying out nothing. And the reason why they're stuck doing this method is because of the abolition of the long gun registry. Previously in Canada, right now, you have to register any restricted firearms, and so AR-15s were previously restricted. They know who has those. Handguns were restricted. They know who has those. But the vast majority of these firearms were long guns, and the long gun registry was abolished. So when you ever hear, we need a registry, I've heard that in the US, we need to register guns. It solved 0 crimes in Canada. The one time I saw them trotting out the registry solved a crime, it was literally a guy who was recognized by the bank teller in his small town. because, and they were like, oh, well, we confirmed that it was him because the gun was registered to his dad. But they also knew it was him because the teller literally knew who he was and addressed him by name. They've never solved a crime with this. They've never prevented any deaths with it. The entire purpose of this is confiscation. And, in fact, Prime Minister Carney let slip in the in question period. He was being asked about the program, and he let slip and used the word registry. Because the whole, give them advance notice of what your guns are, they're trying to build a new registry with that. So, if you don't comply, because they've said, oh, it's voluntary, well, if you don't comply, then they will find who's got these guns, kick down people's doors, and take the guns. They've said that they will...
Forced compliance, right.
Yep. So, it's as voluntary as when a mugger puts a gun to your face and says, would you give me your wallet, please?
But it's okay, because the Minister of Public Safety has offered to pay the bail of his tenant if he resists and gets arrested.
It's crazy. So I want to know about this leaked audio, because if I'm not mistaken, there was more to the audio, up to and including an admission that this proposal will do nothing to curb crime. This is just to court the far left vote in Canadian politics. Is that true?
Quebec voters specifically. I'm not sure if they fall on the far left.
He said Quebec as opposed to far left, but what happened? His tenant, they were I've got the full audio, including parts that haven't been released because they're just not important. But his tenant is there. They're discussing landlord-tenant issues, and his tenant is very prudently recording this, because that's what you probably should do if you're a tenant dealing with your landlord. Record your move-in inspections, record your move-out inspections, if it's legal in your area to do, which it is in Canada. This recording was made entirely legally. So, and then for some reason, the minister on his own, the tenant doesn't bring this up. The minister actually says, oh, and you're not going to like what we're doing Thursday, I think it was. And the tenant's like, what? He's like, yeah, we're implementing the gun buyback. And then they start talking about it. And he says things like, don't ask me to justify the logic of this. When he's asked why they're doing this, he never once says, we're doing it for public safety. He never once says this is going to protect lives. He says, we have to do this for Quebec votes. So this is purely political. He actually encourages his tenant. He says, well, it's voluntary. And the tenant says, but they'll arrest people and charge them. And he says, well, yes, but if that happens, I will pay your bail. Because the police are not going to have the resources to deal with this. So they probably won't get around to you. And if it happens, I'll pay your bail. When the tenant points out that the compensation amounts, are way below market value, the minister offers to personally reimburse him for the difference. I will personally pay you the difference in value, between the market price and I mean, the prices they're offering are terrible from the outset, but they also don't include any modifications you might have made. So, you buy a stock AR, and then you take it and you tune the hell out of it. You make it a really nice gun. They don't pay any of that. If you turn it in with optics on it, they won't pay you for the optics. If, any of these things, they just won't cover. And they also, you could have the first AR that ever rolled off a line with, Stoner's personal signature on it.
Serial number 1, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I have no idea what that would be worth, but they will pay you as if it's any bog standard AR. So this is becoming an issue with, there's a whole bunch of military models, for instance. And, the difference between a military collectible, you could have one that's just been dragged through a forest for 30 years of hunting, and it's worth basically nothing now because it's shot out, it's, non-matched, serial numbers. Or you could have a presentation piece with a, super interesting historical background that might be worth 6 figures, and they'll pay you $700 for it.
That's
if you get paid at all. Go ahead.
AR-15, SP1. I've been made aware by one business that they've had to hand in an AR-15 SP1, one of the very originals, I believe, of the AR-15, and that's gotten them pennies. It's gone.
They should have called me.
they should definitely. Maybe they still can't call you. So this is a foreign concept. I mean, we've had this discussion in the United States, right? The gun buyback, and we mock them. We have people doing 3D printed parts, going in and getting their, whatever gift card just to make fun of it, because they don't work down here, and it's just political theater. That's all it is. It's pandering for votes, but it seems like they're taking it to the extreme in Canada, where you have voluntary turning in of your private property until you don't volunteer, and then we're just kind of going to come to your house in the middle of the night, guns drawn, and drag you and your property out together. You're never getting your property back, and you may or may not get your freedom back. That is a bridge too far. I think most Americans would find this to be absolutely appalling, as I'm sure Canadians do. And I want to know from you, Tom, being on the business side, you said this has negatively affected businesses. I'm a gun store owner as well. I'm a partner in a gun store here. And, we constantly deal with things. And just a brief history of some of the craziness we've dealt with. Braces. They're not a stock, then they are a stock. Then, well, maybe they're a stock if you incidentally and accidentally touch them to your shoulder, but otherwise they're not a stock. Nope, they're a stock again. And now we have a court decision saying, nope, they're not a stock. They're just a brace. Meanwhile, gun dealers are putting them on the shelves, taking them off, putting them on the shelves, taking them off. And then customers come to us angry, like, why did you sell me something illegal? It wasn't illegal 2 minutes ago when we sold it to you. I see the effects of it in a much smaller, microcosm scale here in the United States. Tell me how this has affected the Canadian gun business, because I can only imagine we're talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of firearms that are going to be affected by this.
I can't speak as a retailer, but I will comment one thing that I know the retailers are going through. They are going through the issue that many of them in 2020 had purchased firearms on a business loan, as you do, with the expectation of selling them. Those firearms were then banned, and they sat in storage, having to pay off the loan, costing the storage fees, and so on, for 5+ years. 5+ years. That's ridiculous. You can't operate a business under those circumstances with that much capital tied up. And we're talking, businesses having $250,000 or more worth of property easily. Not to mention the impact on the accessories market for those who had accessories. Multiple businesses that produced accessories for a variety of rifles, old and new, have kicked the bucket. And then coming on to my own personal business, conducting 2-gun matches, what I've seen is the sheer confusion. So not only have we had legislation written which bans a list of named firearms, we also in Canada have something called the Firearms Reference Table, and that is a document which is ostensibly not a legal document. It's just something that the police use to determine whether or not to arrest you, take your property, and put your entire life and livelihood at risk. But that's not something legal. Don't worry. What they've been doing...
Whether it's a legal document or not actually is something that changes depending on whether it's convenient for the government.
Yes. Now, what this is also, how this has been influencing my shooters is something gets banned on the firearms reference table, and it is dictated by the government not to be a legal document. Therefore, my shooters believe I can come to a match, have a nice day with my family, go home, don't need to worry about this. But then they do, because they get pulled over for whatever reason, and then all of a sudden they've got a prohibited firearm, and they've been shooting with a prohibited firearm, and now they're all in trouble. And that's been pushing people away. The other issue is you buy a chest rig or a belt kit, you put your magazines in it, you put your all sorts of stuff in it, and your optic, your sling, your bipod. I would say more often than not, you can add twice as much to the value of a firearm on it in accessories. Those are all now worthless. They say, we're not getting any money for those. There's no option to hand them in, and who can we sell them to? There's no logic at which point you would say, I can sell a pinned to 5-round magazine to an American with shipping costs and tariffs and whatnot. It's just it's become worthless. So you've got people who, sure, they might get $1,500 for their $2,000 firearm, but they've got $10,000 of additional accessories and property, which are entirely worthless as a result of the ban. No one's going to put a 3.5 times magnification trigger con on a bolt action because, yeah, you can do it.
Why?
But why?
Yeah.
And that's, it's been knocking people down. And the erosion is not just of people's finances, which is very significant, and their ability to have fun. It's the erosion in trust of the law, what is perceived to be the law, and the people who create it.
Yes.
There's a sense of bitterness that only grows as you take away people's property for blatant lies. And this is not just, I've been doing it for 2 years. This is people who've been doing it for 20 years, and they've gathered $200,000 worth of property. Even if you've only got, say, $40,000 over the space of 20 years of collecting, okay, that's a house deposit. This is messing with people's lives. $20,000 over 5 years. Let's say you got a return on investment of 5%, which isn't much. That's still a huge amount of money to people. It's just been crushing to every individual. And these people are plumbers. They are teachers. They are managers. No one's getting anything from this.
You bring up an interesting point, and this is something that we've dealt with in American politics. A lot of these laws are structured in such a way to cause confusion. And we talked about this a little bit pre-show, that if you can muddy the waters enough and make the process for even owning a firearm so convoluted within the law, up to and including to the point that, well, maybe if I buy this today, it may actually become illegal tomorrow. What you're doing is forcing people to opt out of their rights to own firearms. Now, I call it a right because here in the United States we have a Second Amendment, and it is a right to own a firearm.
But
you're making it so messy. I'm sorry.
I would say you've got a right to be able to take at face value what you're being told, even if you only have a legal privilege. If you're told these are being banned and that's the end of it, and you can go and buy something else now, you have a right to believe that. Now, there's a fair argument to be made about how trustworthy certain people are, but
politicians aren't trustworthy. I'll just tell you that right now.
Exactly. But the issue with my business, people were just getting cut, their feet knocked out from under them year after year. 2020, we had the initial ban. 2021, there's a ban on the transfer of all handguns. So if you've got 20 and I've got one, doesn't matter. That's how it stays for the rest of your life.
I have a gun that I bought just specifically because I was going to buy it, do a video on it because it's ridiculous. It's like the Heritage, Rough Rider or whatever with the massive barrel. And I'm stuck with this thing because I can't sell it to anybody now.
Exactly. And you've got people going through the exact same course, the Canadian Firearms Safety course, which ostensibly is what you do to go through with the background checks that take place to show that you are a person who is reasonable to own a firearm. Now we've got people who are doing the exact same course as I've done, who are not eligible to own a handgun, but for some reason I am, just because I bought it before a certain date. And this is what I mean by the erosion of trust. You can set up reasonable processes for anything, car ownership, house buying, whatever. But if you just completely sweep past them because you feel like it, no one's going to believe in them or follow them.
Well, and you've seen a lot of people who've been very badly treated by this. As an example, you'll have, I get calls nonstop, and unfortunately there's not a whole lot I can do for them, where it's like their father brought back like a Luger from, they've got a Luger that was brought back from World War II. It's a family heirloom. And their father has died, and they say, well, this is supposed to come to me in the will. It's specifically named as coming to me in the will. And I go, but unfortunately the government has said no. And nobody's sticking up the liquor store with their Heritage, Luger. It's just not a thing. Mm-hmm. But you also see, like, the 3-gun competitors who bought, like, a really nice AR to compete with, and that was banned. Okay. So then they bought another, like, $5,000 gun with additional components and accessories and so forth, because the government said, it's okay, we banned only these things. Mm-hmm. And then they banned again, and then again. And so you've got people who've got, like, $15,000 in competition guns because the government said this is the last ban, we swear.
Yeah.
And it's insane. I see people... The other thing is that the amnesty itself has been a false promise, because what happens is that the police, if they encounter your gun, the classifications now are so complicated that it's impossible for the average person, or even a person with expertise, to just look at a gun, and unless you've got something memorized, like, okay, I know that the Tavor is on the banned list, okay, and that's a Tavor. But if you're dealing with like an unfamiliar gun, there's no way to just look at its classification, like its qualities, and determine where it is. Like, this is a 22, so it's not banned. Nope, that doesn't work, because there's lots of banned 22s now.
Yeah.
So what they do is they go and they look it up on the firearms reference table, and the firearms reference table shows it as prohibited. And it doesn't show that it's covered by the amnesty. So what's been happening is you get circumstances where the police are, for some reason, in somebody's house. And this could be something like your kid gets on the phone and your kid calls 911 because the kid is playing with the phone. And when that happens, the police feel that they need to do a home inspection.
A safety
like
check.
A home.
Right.
Yeah, they're going in, they're making sure that there's not somebody like kidnapped and held in a closet. But when they find these guns, in the course of that, they check them, and it comes back as prohibited firearms. So I'm seeing people who are under the amnesty, they are protected, in theory, but they end up getting arrested and charged and needing to disentangle all of this because they have things that the government has said is legal to have, and in fact has said, if you turn anything in advance of the amnesty or of the buyback program, you will never get paid for it. So I've actually had some people who did that. They turned things in and they're like, can I participate in the buyback program now? Nope. You turned it in too early.
Yeah. I want to get into something here, guys, really quick. I think a lot of folks are tuning in about this particular item of news that prompted me to take issue with what was going on. And that is it's being said allegedly, I don't know, so I'm going to defer to you guys to tell me what's actually going on up there. But it has been alleged that an American gun company, Colt Canada, who is owned by CZ, a company that's based out of the Czech Republic, they have somehow involved themselves potentially in this because the police, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, the police and other government officials have said, military have said, we're not destroying these firearms. Well, then what's been alleged is that the CZ Colt group has stepped up and said, oh, we'll do it. Now, they've also made a public statement, press statement, in their defense where they said this is completely fictitious. We have nothing to do with this, and blamed a couple of posts on X that I saw. Can you please explain to the audience what's really happening there?
So here's the background. Colt Canada they used to sell to civilians. They haven't sold to civilians for a long time. They exclusively have one customer. That is the Canadian military. So they make the C7, the C9, like the military's guns. Now, they have a main facility in Kitchener, but they also have a secondary facility. And when businesses were told that they had to send in their business inventory, they were given an address to send it to. And that address was number 186 Shoemaker Street in Kitchener. Now that facility is leased by Colt Canada and has been for a long time. And I have confirmation on that from Colt Canada employees, from various others. That facility. So when they're issuing this denial, the thing is, what I'd love to do is I'd love to be able to follow a gun, but they're being the government has said that they will not say who their contractors are, that they consider this to be something that has to be maintained as confidential for security purposes. And I suspect that part of it is also that they don't want to let people know because it might be embarrassing. But those guns that were taken as part of this confiscation scheme from businesses were sent to a facility that is exclusively controlled by Colt Canada. Now, they've issued this denial, and I doubt that they are straight up lying in the denial, but there's various little bits of weasel words. They say, is not and will not be. but that doesn't say whether they have in the past. So it's possible, one possibility is that they assisted with the business part and then are not assisting further. That is possible. But it seems very odd when the government said, listen, we're going to do this business thing as sort of a test run, that then they would switch providers. So maybe that's the case, or maybe it's not. But the other thing that I wonder is maybe they've spun up like a subsidiary, some numbered company whose purpose entirely is to handle this, buyback, and that might be owned by Colt Canada or owned by them and is running this, and they'll do the confiscation and then spin down that company and it no longer exists because it never had any assets. I don't know. But I would love to get like a representative from CZ, we'd say CZ out here, but just to
get that.
just to have them answer like the questions, because when they say they issue this blanket form letter denial, what they're not doing is they're not answering the question of why did you get these guns previously and did something change? Is like what's going on here?
What I saw was, in essence, a one-sentence denial. And so, and again, I just want to make it crystal clear, for legal reasons, I'm saying this is alleged. I don't know what's going on. I don't know that they've taken part in any of this. This is this scuttlebutt on the internet, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this conversation today. So, anyway, I'm sorry, Tom, I did not mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. I mean, I was just going to add an additional component of the statement they've made is quite specifically citizen. Now, I don't know what, Ian can slap me on the wrist, but to me that reads as not denying having taken firearms from businesses as opposed to individually owned firearms. And in addition to that,
it could also be weasel words in the sense of, well, the government is taking all of these guns from you. The government's confiscating the guns. Mm-hmm. And they might be, and this is again speculation, they might be weaseling to say, well, we're just destroying guns for the government. And so I would love to see like the Colt CZ group, like the larger umbrella, commit to not destroying a single gun for the Canadian government. And just say, we will not destroy guns for the Canadian government, full stop. And possibly with the exception of, like, if they get C7s or C9s that are being decommissioned or something. But, like, we will never destroy a non-C7, C9, like, gun. Can they make that commitment? Because I'm sure that they can't. And, like, we'll just have to see. So their denial is a denial, but there's a lot of room. Did they participate? They haven't said that. They've said is not and will not. Can they deny subsidiaries? I don't know. I get people who are asking me for like definitive proof, and the thing is I have things that are pretty definitive as to what happened with the businesses in the past. I'm sufficiently confident on that. It's been reported by a whole bunch of people that they were involved before I ever got there. The question is, what's happening now? And the way they're phrasing their denial doesn't answer my questions. And I've reached out to like CZ and Colt Canada to try to get them, and all I've gotten was the denial. I did get one guy on the phone, and I started asking him these questions, and he said, I don't have the answers to any of this. I was just given this line to tell you. I'll get somebody to call you, and they'll be able to answer those questions. And still waiting on that.
Still waiting. I was just going to speculate. You probably are still waiting on that phone call, and that's truly unfortunate.
I reached out to them a long time ago when the business thing started up, and I reached out to basically every Colt Canada, CZ USA, the Colt CZ larger ambit. And I could not get an answer. So, yeah.
It's not just that we're relying on the fact that Canadian businesses have been sending their firearms to a Colt Canada address. The actual businesses themselves, one I've spoken to, has told me that they asked Public Safety Canada, specifically, are these going to Colt Canada? And we're told yes. In addition to that, we're not just going off audio. We have a written statement, a written report with Wes Winkle, I think, the head of the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association. And what that is a conglomerate, a organization that represents various Canadian sporting firearms and ammunition businesses. One of the leaders, Wes, was involved in discussing with the federal government the values of firearms to be, when forming a list of values for those firearms to be confiscated from businesses, and naturally that information will have fed into civilian-owned firearms as well. He himself has stated that the firearms were going from businesses to Colt Canada. He himself stated they are overwhelmed, and we may not have a literal written piece of paper from Colt Canada saying we done it. What we have is the people who sent the guns saying it went to Colt Canada, the person involved in the organization of pricing and other activities with those businesses, and the federal government saying Colt Canada have received those guns. We've got the address of where those firearms are going to. We've got a member of parliament specifically asking if this specific business is involved, and an answer being refused. And it's the logical organization to process these firearms on the basis of the licensing and the storage facilities required to process initially 12,000 firearms and then subsequently hundreds of thousands of firearms. And then really, if I was a firearms business of the scale of CZ Group, or even just the individual components therein, if I definitely hadn't done this, I would have said as much on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and my explanation would have been a bit longer. It would have been, we've never been involved in, we will not be, are currently not involved in, and we will never be involved in the confiscation and destruction of privately owned firearms. How hard would it have been to have said that?
That would seem like a proper statement to me.
So on the balance of all of those things I've just told you, I don't feel it's unreasonable to look at Colt Canada and say, give us an answer. Come on.
Right. I'd love to be wrong, because when I go to competition shoots, it's been the CZ Shadow that I'm running, like Shadow 2. In fact, when the handgun freeze was announced, there was a little period where they let slip that the freeze was coming before the freeze was in effect. I bought 2 Shadow 2s in that 8-hour period or whatever. The very first gun I bought, because you get your firearms license, you buy a gun. CZ 452. That was the first 452 Lux. That's the first gun I bought. I've still got it. And they're great guns. I can't say anything bad about the guns. But, that'll be the last I buy from them if it turns out that they had any part in this, because I cannot support a company that is willing to turn their back on Canadians. And one of the things I've seen on Twitter and X, and so forth, is Americans going, well, it's Canada, I don't care. Canada has always been what the U.S. looks to. Like, when people want to ban guns in the States, they look to Canada and they say, look, Canada's done it. And the same company that would be happy to help out with Canadian gun bans, if they're happy to help out with a Canadian gun ban, you better believe they'd be happy to help out with an American one as well.
Exactly.
So, and the thing is I'm willing to, if CZ Colt screwed up, if they went and said, okay, we'll participate, and now they're thinking better of it. Okay, just back out. Eat whatever contractual penalties
admit your guilt, back out of it, and do the right thing.
That'd be fine by me, because CZ bought Colt. They bought Colt, and I can imagine CZ going, hey, we've got this nice organization in Canada. It's got some multi-year fixed contracts turning out profit. We'll just leave them alone. They don't sell to civilians. They just do their own thing. Don't kill the golden goose. And then if Colt Canada, just with no understanding of the civilian firearms market, because they just don't do it in Canada, and then they don't understand the impact on the rest of the group, went ahead and accepted this contract because, yay, more government money. I could see how that could happen. And all it would take is CZ Group to turn around and say, this is why this happened. This does not match our values. This is how we're going to make things right in Canada. And this is what we're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. I could get behind that. My first handgun, CZ. First hunting rifle, CZ. First 22, CZ. None of us wants this.
Yeah.
Right.
Just make it right.
I'm a lifelong CZ fan. I've been to the factory a couple of times in the Czech Republic, and I would like, if this has happened, I would like for them to own it and come clean, and hopefully they haven't been involved. Right? I certainly don't know.
I'd love to.
But
I just love to hear them answer the questions, right? And
yeah, right. Answer the questions, be forthcoming, and as you guys said, a proper statement would simply be, "We have never been involved in this. We're not going to be involved in this going forward." And
it would have to
nothing to do with
explain
this.
why the Shoemaker property was involved, because that's a known thing, and so all of these denials that don't explain the known details are a problem.
That's what's
not helpful.
There's just no way around that. They specifically, definitely received them. At address.
And in defense of my countrymen and women, I want to say that I've seen an awful lot of posts on the American side of X saying they're going to boycott CZ and Colt and all this other stuff. Some pages that are dedicated to posting lots of CZ pictures saying, I'm done until I find out more. Even I made a post saying, this breaks my heart. If true, I have to retire my CZ. And people are saying, don't do that. The only reason I'm saying that is because I can't be seen in video carrying a handgun when this is going on. I don't know what's happening, but even if there's even a hint of impropriety, I want to support our brothers and sisters up north in this fight. So
100%.
Where do we stand?
I've seen so many people online who have been saying and I was not expecting that. I hoped that, but I was really not expecting it. And it's been tremendously heartwarming to see.
Yeah.
Because, and quite frankly, none of these companies care about the Canadian market. There just aren't enough people here and there aren't enough gun owners. It's the American market that scares them.
That's absolutely right. So
if there's a change in course in this, it'll be because American gun owners stood up for principles. And I'll tell you, I go down to the U.S., every time I hear the anthem, I'm going to be just, standing at attention for that. If the U.S. has got our back, because I like it, it's sort of Canada and the U.S. have long been great allies, absolutely,
and agreed on this end, absolutely.
Yeah, I enjoy going down to the U.S. shooting with running competitions. I suck, but it's it's great to be able to do that. And the support we have seen is just amazing. And I'm not I'm not asking anybody to throw out their CZ products or anything, but
right.
I'm not going to be buying anything new, especially Canadians. We can't even buy new handguns. If I want to replace the Shadow 2s with something, I can't. So we're in this tough spot, but they've got to know that this is not okay, that this is not cool.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, I just wanted to know more information, on our end, because we're not clear what's happening up there. We've heard the commentary from both sides from, things are really, really bad and they're definitely doing this, to then their statement saying we're not. And I'm glad that you guys have shared that insight as to what's going on. It appears that even you guys don't truly know what's going on. We in the United States have a tendency to immediately burn companies to the ground if there's even a hint that they may have done something that would be classified as anti-gun. And so the American response, typically in social media anyway, is very quick, very pointed, and pretty fearsome. And I've seen a little bit of that. But I do want to know the truth. And if there have been false allegations against CZ and Colt, I do want that to be known. But I also want it to be known that if they're involved, own it, apologize for it, and set things right. I mean, that's the only course of action going forward. Lying about it certainly isn't something any of us are willing to accept. One thing I want to ask before we wind down our show this afternoon, where do we currently stand with this proposal? Has it been enacted? Is it definitely going forward? Or is there enough pressure being applied that maybe these politicians are starting to rethink their course of action?
Are you talking about the firearms confiscated from
The
businesses?
confiscation, the banning of what I've heard is up to 600,000 different firearms.
Yeah.
Where are we at?
They've said that they're going ahead, and they've continued to push forward even after the release of the incredibly embarrassing candid audio, because the politician told the truth for once when he thought no one would ever know. And, so that... But the thing is the public is not happy with this. Even, like, what I'm hearing online, you get people who are like, I hate guns, but this ban is stupid. And people don't... Like, the Canadian economy right now is difficult, and we're looking at a perhaps record deficit on this next budget. And people are going, why are we going to be spending millions of dollars? Like, this could build hundreds of MRI machines on taking guns from, Canadian gun owners.
That don't use them in crime anyway. I mean, talk about a low crime rate. Canada certainly has it, involved with, where firearms are used. So it's always mind-boggling to me, the extremes to which the Canadian government's willing to go, constantly blaming inanimate objects for crime that almost doesn't really exist. And so it certainly is politically motivated, and it's so clear to me that how the Canadians that vote for this stuff don't see it. But I'm glad that maybe they're saying, well, this is a huge waste of money because we're really not fixing anything. We're throwing money down a hole for political reasons and denying people their rights.
But there is the hope that they could still back off and say this is becoming too much of a stupid move. And part of that, at this point, part of the Canadian landscape is that it's actually very difficult for them to deal with these guns once they've made them prohibited, because, for instance, they can't just send them to like a smelter or like a scrap metal yard. In the U.S., like, when they seize guns, they could probably just send them off to, like, a scrap metal yard, and that's fine. Here, there's got to be very specific, specialized licensing. And so you need a company that both has, like, an industrial capacity to deal with these things, but also has very specific licensing and vetting that has to be done of every employee that might handle one of these things. So it's very difficult for them to spin up and find a new provider. If it is Colt, and if Colt pulls out, then they're going to be stuck trying to figure out who else can do it. And the thing is the other gun manufacturers in Canada have either been destroyed by this, because there's people who've gone out of business, or have been so directly affected by this that they're not going to want to have any part in it. Like, if they go up to Crusader Arms, who make the crypto, I don't think that Crusader Arms is going to be super happy, because not only did they ban, like, their primary products at first, they also, when Crusader Arms made a product for the Canadian market, they turned around and retroactively decided that it had always been banned. So they're not going to be on board. No. It could be that they will be in a very difficult spot if this... if they lose their provider on this.
Every bump in the road is worth it. Every single addition to the cost and duration after 5 years takes us closer to them holding their hands up and reassessing the situation.
Well, hopefully a good investigative journalist will get involved and do some digging and figure out what parties are involved in this scheme. Because it does need to be known. In a presumably free country like Canada, transparency is key. Same thing right here in the United States, right? Before we close out today's broadcast, guys, how can people get involved? How can people help, with the battle that you guys are fighting?
Right now, if, in Canada, send letters to your members of parliament, send letters to Colt Canada, and post online. Those are all helpful things. In the U.S., make sure, CZ, make sure Colt CZ knows that you're unhappy if you're unhappy. And the thing is if Colt can come out and answer these questions and actually resolve these issues rather than giving like a denial that's full of holes, I'll be the first to publish a thing saying, Colt's cleared, Colt's good, we're fine, like good. They're fine.
That's what it should be, yeah.
And I would love to see that, but right now that's not where we're at.
Right.
But, the people who are saying, I will stop buying like S&B ammunition, I will stop buying, CZ products, that's helpful, because if they see it in their pocketbook, they might look at the Canadian, and it's been reported that apparently the contract for Canada is somewhere in the range of 10 million. If they look at the 10 million one time out of Canada towards a bigger loss out of the US, they may tell the government, listen, we'd rather just eat this and give you your money back and we're walking out. And if the government at that point, they will not know what to do with, hundreds of thousands of guns if they're stuck with them. So,
well, let's make it as painful as possible if we can't stop it, right?
Yep, that's the glimmer of hope here.
Get in comms with CZ USA, politely and firmly demand answers in detail as to all members of the group, not just the CZ within CZ group. I would again make a choice, personal choice, whether or not your values support an organization that may be doing this and has chosen not to respond clearly, and make a decision. If you're in Canada, continue to firmly and politely contact your members of parliament, highlighting what this money could be used for instead, what the impact on the firearms industry, because you kill an industry, you lose the tax that comes from that industry. Where this could all be doing something better. I think all of us on this call today and everyone listening would far more easily be able to save lives if we had $750 million to spend than if you spent that money melting metal. And just really keep the noise up. We can't let this slip out. We need answers. And again, I will hold my hands up again. I'll side by side with Ian, say, hey, I apologize for any misconstrued items here if we've got this wrong. But right now, we can see it. Everything's gone to the Colt Canada address. And why is that? Just answer us.
Yeah, I think that would do a lot, right? Just give the answers, be clear, concise, and not one sentence responses that, as you said, Ian, are full of holes.
And if they did the business and they're willing to back out of the civilian thing, I will 100% be like, all right, I'm a fan again. You screwed up, but so long as you're not helping going forward and helping with the main sort of main effort of this, I'm a forgiving guy. It's
that's you know what, and God bless you for it. A lot of folks wouldn't be under such circumstances, but these are tense times. This was unbelievable news to me when I first learned of it. Being in the two-way fight actively almost every single day of the week here in the United States, when I see, you guys struggling with something that it takes the stuff we deal with and goes so much further. And I just think, my gosh, I'm so glad we have a Second Amendment, because at least we have a legal basis to challenge a lot of this stuff in court. Guys, I want to thank you both for taking the time to come onto the podcast and to tell us what's going on up in Canada. And I hope that you guys stick around after the video goes live, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions in the comments. If you guys could answer those questions, that would be truly beneficial, because again, I'm not that well versed in Canadian politics. So both of you, thank you so much for joining us. God bless, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
Thank you for the chance to talk about this.
Thank you so much, because we definitely need the help, and we appreciate it everywhere we see it. So thank you.
All right, thank you guys.